Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Freethought Hour. Now, unfortunately, Tertia can't be with us today. She's got a minor hiatus in her life, so we're wishing her good luck with that. But we do have an excellent guest from Canada. He is a Catholic, but he's also fully clued up with science. So let's meet Joey Paul. How the devil are you, Joey?
Very good. Thank you.
Good, good. Yeah, you're in Ottawa, I believe.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, a rainy day here in Ottawa.
Oh, well, we've broken records. February was the wettest ever since records began. Yeah,
we've had the warmest February ever.
Really? All right. Okay.
We have no snow on the ground right now.
Yeah.
We're about a month ahead of where we're normally towards spring.
Yeah. All the flowers up and the trees coming into leaf early.
Yeah. Well, not quite yet, because that usually doesn't happen to the 1st of May. So.
Yeah. I've not been to Canada, so I'm not used to the climate there. No. So the first question that comes up in Freethought Hour is, how did you get to be the Joey Paul that you are today? Because very often I find I'm unusual in that I haven't had to dig my way out of a religion like a lot of my guests have, because I interview a lot of Americans and they got indoctrinated or inducted, one or the other, soft and hard, when they were young.
I dug myself in.
Oh, really? Interesting. Do tell.
So I grew up in a sort of a nominal Catholic home. We went to Catholic schools, but in Canada, because of a constitutional quirk, when the Constitution was written, the Catholics were guaranteed to have their own education system. That was one of the compromises that brought about the Canadian Constitution. So in Ontario, we have a separate publicly funded Catholic schools. And they're rather nominally Catholic. They have a religion class. You learn the basics. You learn who Jesus is. You learn basic theology. You have some exposure to the scriptures, but nothing extensive. Never really got any idea of relationship with God, relationship with Jesus. It was just information. And went through that. And I went to Catholic school till grade 8. Had a general knowledge of the faith, and I generally looked at the Catholic moral teaching as a good example of how to live your life. It's a good working hypothesis for an ethical system.
Yeah. So to an extent, I share your upbringing, because in this country, especially at that time when I was young, it was compulsory to teach Anglicanism, basically, to all children. And it still is technically compulsory to hold a Christian, or it depends on the actual denomination of the school. If you've designated your school as being Jewish or Muslim or whatever, then you can do that religion. But it's still compulsory to have a morning assembly of all the children of a religious nature, although nobody follows it. It's one of those silly laws that's on the statute book that has been disregarded and just never taken off. We have a number of those, I discovered one the other day.
Which you get in common law.
Yeah. I discovered one the other day, which is about policemen who are supposed to use their capes to shield ladies and offer them their helmet to wee into if they're desperate. This goes back to the times before public toilets,
Exactly.
And that's never been rubbed off the statute book either. How weird is that? But I also wanted to talk to you about, because the Catholic Church in Canada has a bit of a checkered record, hasn't it? Because especially in educational children's homes is what I'm referring to.
That wasn't part of this. That was separate.
Yeah.
for the native residential schools.
Yes, that's right.
Those
Yes.
were residential schools. These were just regular
Yeah.
schools that you got bused to every day and went home and all that.
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Mm.
These were the residential school issue was different, and that wasn't on our notice at that time.
No. It's only been revealed recently, hasn't it?
That's only really come out
Yeah.
in the recent decades. There's been various things with realizing how, and we should have realized, and to go back,
Yes.
Catholics should have realized it was wrong from the beginning. And
Yes.
it was an interaction between government and church, and government and church interactions often don't work very well.
Yes.
So that should have been noticed anyway. But just to go back to my story. So in grade 9, I went to a public high school. So no religion. There were people in my class who were Muslim, who were atheist, who were Jewish, who were various different Christian denominations. I remember having interesting conversations about God in math class.
Oh yeah, maths. Yes.
Yeah, with various different people, and I was somewhat of a nerd. Science was my thing. I was in all the science programs, and really into science, computers, and all that type of stuff. And I got in with a group, and I was a morning person, and I found I like playing cards and board games.
Yeah.
And I ended up going into this group when I was in grade 11, grade 11, grade 12, that consisted of, well, when I was in grade 12, it was mostly grade 12 guys in the English program and grade 12 and grade 11 girls in the French program. There were sort of two groups that merged together over playing cards in the morning at lunch.
Yeah.
And a bunch of them went to this Christian youth group on Wednesday evenings. It was an interdenominational Christian youth group, and they kept talking about it. It sounded like fun, and so I was nominally Christian at the time. I didn't really go to church, and I remember once in grade 8, when priest asked me if I go to church, I used the excuse in the Bible saying, "Go into your room in silent. You're not supposed to go to church because you're supposed to go to your closet in silent and pray." Well, I didn't go into my closet and pray either.
You can find anything you want in the Bible, can't you?
Yeah. And there is a right way to look at things and a wrong way to look at things. And that was a wrong way to look at things. But so I went to this group, and it was really welcoming. It was good. It was time to, like, they played games, they gave little talks, practice. Oftentimes the kids gave talks themselves about subjects that they had learned about and interesting, and other people came in. And so it was just really welcoming and good. I remember the second night we went there, we went to a drama performance where this person did a drama performance of the Gospel of Luke, but from memory, from like a one-act play. And that was really spectacular. And so I kept going.
And there was girls.
There were some girls. But that wasn't a big thing at that time.
Right, that wasn't your main motivation. Okay.
No, it was good connections. It was good friends.
Yeah.
And as I was going there and stuff, I said, maybe I should go to church earlier, more regularly. So I start going to my local Catholic church because I'd went to Catholic church there earlier, and we'd been, I started to just start to pray, start to have a relation, and it really came into having a relationship with God. And I know that could be completely psychological or whatever, but that was how it felt anyway. And I'd read the scriptures, started going to church, started looking at things. had a little bit of a crisis of faith when I read John 17, where it said that they all may be one, realizing that there was this division between Catholics and Protestants.
Yeah.
And since most of the people in the youth group were Protestant, I was, but the leader happened to be Orthodox.
Oh.
The adult leader of the youth group happened to be Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
And so she lent me a book, The Apostolic Fathers.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I read the Apostolic Fathers and read the history of the church, I became convinced that the Catholic Orthodox position on theology was correct.
Interesting.
And so it was through the readings of the early fathers and the history of the church,
yeah,
that, especially the two things, the view of the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and the view of a governance structure composed of deacons, priests, and bishops. Because you see that in the earliest writings after the Bible was written. St. Ignatius of Antioch, St. Justin the Martyr, St. Irenaeus of Lyon, all those early Christian writers wrote extensively on all those topics. And these are topics which Protestants later would come to have a vehement disagreement with the Catholic Church on.
So it was the nature of a hierarchy that convinced you?
No, just the constant tradition from the beginning to now.
Uh-huh.
So those were things that you were able to see very clearly in the writings of the early church fathers.
Right.
So I don't know if you've read some of the writings from the early church outside the Bible, like St. Ignatius of Antioch and St. Justin the Martyr.
No, I haven't, I'm afraid.
And yeah, so they're all written in the 2nd century. 107 to 150 AD is St. Irenaeus of Lyon's a little later, probably about 170 AD, I think is what they say his dates are.
Right. So I'm aware that much of the Bible has no heritage earlier than the 1st or 2nd century, certainly post the period of Jesus's lifetime.
Oh yeah, well the Gospels are post-resurrection chronicles, like they're post-resurrection retrospectives on the life of Jesus, right?
Yeah. So in that case,
that's how they're written.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, they don't even claim to be written by observers, do they? They say that they're according to the four named.
Mark and Luke
Yeah.
weren't directly observers anyway, right?
Yeah.
Luke followed Paul. He's probably the most historian of them. Who other than a historian would record that Quirinius was governor of Syria, right? And stuff like that. Matthew was more looking at it in light of the Old Testament, and everyone, they're all a little different, right?
Yeah. And John was very much
very theological.
Well, I would have said very much a marketing man.
I'd say that's more Mark.
Really? Oh, okay.
John was taking the information and putting it in a theological perspective, rather than necessarily. And John is likely the last gospel that was written.
Yes.
And so we don't know.
So,
there's a lot of the history is there, but there's a lot of things that are lost to history too.
Yeah. So can we look? We've got an audience member here. Hi, Rob. Thanks for watching. We've got Rob is making the point that the named authors of the Gospels weren't necessarily the real authors.
Yeah,
they
we
got
don't know.
named after these people rather than written by these people.
The earliest we have is we do have a fragment of the Gospel of John that was dated to around 100 AD.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
so there you've got another problem, haven't you? Because if it was dated, I don't know whether that's the earliest of all the Gospels, but it's certainly the earliest of John. If
Yeah.
it was dated 100 years after the
so that'd be
events,
70 years after.
sorry,
That'd be 70 years after.
yeah. So it's another generation.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah,
that's a copy of a fragment of a papyrus that was a copy of something. So when did the original that was found in Egypt? So it would have had to get to Egypt. It was probably written in Greece. So there was fairly good communication back and forth there, but how fast would that go and stuff like that? Historians have been debating this for decades.
They have, yeah.
So I'm
some
no
people,
expert at it, and there's varying different opinions depending on which historian.
I didn't really want to get down this rabbit hole anyway too far, because
no, exactly.
I'm not an expert, neither are you. So we're grasping. We're grasping at straws.
Yeah, but I came to that, and so I joined the church, the Catholic. Like I started going to the Catholic Church and being participated and being involved in ministry, and I was on the parish council for a while. I was teaching kids First Communion and confirmation preparation. I was working in teaching adults faith formation as they were wanting to join the Catholic Church, and various things like that. Met my beautiful wife through church. Now, I remember her coming in earlier, but that was her coming into a whole big group of us, young adults who were part of this church.
Yeah.
And but the first time she remembers me was at World Youth Day in Toronto in 2002, when we were there to see Pope John Paul II, and we had a big mass out on overnight mass at the fields in Toronto. Yeah. And there were a whole bunch of frogs on that were just popping up around where we were sleeping. So
frog mating time then.
Yeah, it was summer. I don't know, frog mating or just weather, whatever. And so one of my friends grabbed a frog and was bringing it around all the girls, saying, "Kiss it, and you'll meet your Prince Charming."
Yes.
So I was actually engaged to someone else at the time, but that fell through. And so Roxanne kissed the frog, and she met me that night. And but we were good friends for another year after the engagement fell through, right shortly after World Youth Day. And so we were good friends for a year, and then we started going out, and we're married, and we have 4 kids. They have various special needs. They all have ADHD, and 2 are diagnosed with autism. So that keeps it busy, as you can imagine. And so that's focused most of my time in the last last decade or so.
Yeah. You've had heavy duty parenting to be engaged in.
Exactly. And my wife has had a series of medical issues. She had a major concussion in 2010 when she was in a traffic accident, and and while she was pregnant with our youngest. And then she's found that she's very susceptible to concussions afterwards, and has had several since then. Now she's just recovering from a last one 2 years ago, and she's finally got to working every morning. So it's a slow progress, right? But it puts a lot of parenting duties on me as well.
Yeah.
And the pandemic certainly didn't help with all the stuff.
No,
but there's an interesting story in the pandemic with faith and stuff like that. Because in the April of 2020, so we had planned a family vacation for March break. We were going to go on a cruise, and we had it all planned out. It was going to be fun. We really needed a family vacation. It was just, we were all burning out as it was. And then pandemic hits and everyone is stuck at home.
Yeah.
And I was crying out to God, how are we going to get through this?
Yeah.
How are we going to get through all of the, and I knew it wasn't going to be 6 weeks. I knew enough about epidemiology and stuff like that. I knew it wasn't going to be a short-term thing.
Yeah.
And so I was saying, Lord, how are we going to get through this? And then in prayer, I got a message, let them get a dog.
All right. Yeah, yeah.
And now, I've always been against getting a dog because it's a lot of work. And I figured most of the work would come on me. And it was just, so it gets put onto the discernment pile, right? So you can't trust anything that you just get in your head because it could be just your self-talk. It could be that it has to be discerned. So it goes on the discernment pile. I don't mention it at all. And my plan was I'd come back to it in prayer and see, okay, what do we do? Look at stuff, see what happens. Well, the next day, my wife is out working in the garden.
Uh-huh.
It's beginning of April. She's starting to get the garden cleared out and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this gentleman comes by with 2 dogs.
Uh-huh.
And one of them looks like they're giving a little trouble. And so Roxanne strikes up a conversation. It turns out that one of these dogs was just dropped off at his house 4 weeks ago by someone who was going out for an hour and will come back and get the dog and never came back.
Oh.
And he
that was the dog lover.
Because he already had a dog. And
but couldn't handle 2.
But couldn't handle 2. His other dog was older and had some health issues, and the other dog was young. And so he said, I'm going to have to take it to the Humane Society, but I don't have a car. I don't know how I'm going to do that with the pandemic. I don't know how it's all gonna work. And just poured his heart out on this to my wife, who's always wanted a dog.
Yeah.
So she sends one of the kids down. I'm working in the basement at the time because it's all work from home now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, lockdown. Yeah,
lockdown. And she comes, this dog needs a home. Can we keep the dog?
This is the young one, not the older one.
This is the young dog that the gentleman had.
Yeah.
And because I got that message in prayer the day before, I took that as confirmation of my discernment, saying yes. And so I said yes to my wife. She was flabbergasted, really surprised that I said yes, because I hadn't told her about what I got in prayer and what I was on the discernment pile. But I figured that having a dog offered to us was pretty good confirmation of that discernment.
Yeah. So your dog cost you nothing?
Cost us nothing. Well, except for all the vet bills and all the food and all the that adds up.
Yeah.
But we got a beautiful young little dog, and he's quite cute. Charlie is his name. And
what style, what breed of dog?
Yorkshire Terrier.
Oh, very nice. Yes. Yeah.
So there's lots. So, and that really did help us get through the pandemic. And since my wife's latest concussion, it helps get her out to walk. I do most of the walks, but it also gets me out to do walks as well.
Yeah.
When it is. So I don't know. it could be a coincidence. It's
Mm-hmm.
quite possible that that was a coincidence that, yeah, I got the message and the next day I was given a dog, but I've never been given a dog before.
Yeah.
I've never been offered a dog before or
Mhm.
after. It's something that was thing. And that's the thing I find about prayer. Prayer usually doesn't change external events. Prayer changes me.
Uh-huh.
So it changes my attitude, my perception, my view of things.
So as a person who never wanted a dog, how are you getting on?
Oh, good.
The- yeah.
I'm pretty easygoing in general.
Yeah.
And he takes my bed spot at night, and I have to push him off, and he growls at me. But yeah, you know, it's going fine. It's some work, but it's not insane, and the kids enjoy that. So.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm very much a dog fan, and my kids want a dog too, but we've not got them one, but we might now because our family situation has changed.
Yeah.
The person who was resisting getting a dog is no longer with us, so the doors to dogginess are open.
Yeah, no, and it's worked out fine. The dog's been the dog being like, it looks like the dog was probably abused before it was dropped off at this friend's house.
Yeah.
It has intense separation anxiety from my wife.
Yeah.
So has really taken to being the protector of my wife, and
right. Yeah. Dogs have always been very often focused on a one person.
Yeah, exactly.
They like to have a leader.
Yeah.
And they pick one for themselves.
Yeah. My wife's the leader. I'm the servant. I take him for the walks. And
but modern dogs are very much more prone to anxiety, separation anxiety, because they've been intensively bred and less well selected because of the market.
Yeah.
So whereas before we used to breed dogs with more of a purpose, you know, they were gun dogs.
Yeah.
And so they had a function. Now we're all of our dogs are pets, are domestic lap dogs. And so they see that as their role. And when they can't fulfill it, of course, they're upset.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. So there's a lot of different things. But that's just a recent example of where prayer has changed my attitude about something. And I can also go back to when I was entering the workforce in 2000. So I graduated from university, computer systems engineering, in 2000. And that was right at the height of the Nortel hire anyone with a pulse.
Yes.
There was like 50,000 people working for Nortel in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And so
it was a huge expansion of computer activity, wasn't it?
Exactly. And so I'd been offered a really good scholarship to go get a master's degree. So they'd actually pay me to go to school.
Yep.
So I think the scholarship was $19,000 of $2,000, and the tuition was like $9,000. So it'd be like they'd be paying me $10,000 to go get a master's degree.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you that I was lucky in that was the situation that prevailed when I did my first degree, because I'm much older than you, and this was shortly after the war, when a lot of men had been killed, so there was a shortage of trained and skilled and educated people that the nation needed more of. And so back then we were given not only free tuition at university, but also maintenance grants for us to spend on our, accommodation and groceries and whatever we wanted. And I bought a guitar. I see you've got one in the background there.
Yeah, I haven't played much. Just usually I bring it out at Christmas time for Christmas carols.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and just and I was just praying, Lord, what should I do? And then I realized in that I had enough of school and I should go get a job.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at a church ski night and I'm going up the chairlift with someone that I'm acquainted with. Her kids were in my confirmation class. And I was going up the chairlift and just talking and saying, "Oh, what are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I'm going to graduate this year and I'm starting to look for a job."
Yeah.
And she says, "Well, you should talk to my husband. He's a manager at Nortel." So next confirmation night, I give him my resume and it's please come work for us. Because I was a near top student and stuff like that. So, and then later that year, once I was established, I had started to get into work and I was well respected at work as a junior developer. Someone left, so I was taking over sort of a senior role as a junior, simply because there was a gap to fill that someone needed to fill it, and I was there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then the market dropped out.
Oh, yes.
And they started laying off thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
Yes.
But I kept through because partially
you'd got to the level where you were actually useful.
I was useful and I was just in the right place. They were planning to move me to another position in another group, which got completely canceled and let go. But because the senior person had left, I got into there. And so, so we're into a good role. But if I had taken that master's degree, I would have graduated right at the downturn.
Yes.
And there would have
you would have come out with no prospects. Yes.
No prospects. So is that just luck? Perhaps. I think it's God changing my heart to anticipate what the reality is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to produce evidence for that view.
No, exactly. It's completely subjective, right? It's not objective. It's just my experience of prayer.
Yeah. So I could take, for example, my experience of this chat with you as confirmation that I should rush out tomorrow and get a dog.
Oh. You put it on the discernment pile, right? Because discernment is something that's difficult. It's not easy to discern things. And that's what I get a lot of problems. Like being a Catholic, we have these huge bodies of literature that are
you have a great deal
on discernment.
Yes. More than many religions, the Catholics have a huge doctrine and ideology that goes way back.
Yeah,
whereas
and builds on
many
tradition.
of the younger religions don't have that.
No, exactly. And a lot of the fundamentalists, which I tend to debate a lot online, they tend to see things very black and white and very, it's only this way, it can't be any other way.
Yeah, that we call that dogma. And it's got nothing to do with dogs. It's as far away as you can get from dogs as possible, because dogs are very much bonding creatures, whereas dogma people are insistent that they're the only ones that are right.
Yeah, and Catholics have went through that, and I think we've grown a little bit beyond that, especially when you read some of the recent works by Pope Francis. I really liked his Fratelli Tutti on brotherhood. Brothers all is the English translation to that.
Yeah, because he's recently approved same-sex marriage. No, not marriage. Same-sex.
So
Not.
No,
What he hasn't. He
less than
hasn't
that.
actually. Yeah. Tell me about it.
So, and this has caused huge consternations amongst the conservative Catholics, of which I'm not. But I am still connected in with their literature and their media bubbles. But he basically says that if a same-sex couple comes up to a priest and asks for a blessing, the priest can bless them.
Yeah. As long as it's not part of a service or in any way resembling a marriage ceremony.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a movement towards tolerance. I like that. Yeah.
It is. And I don't know if you get Disney Plus where you are. Yeah. There's a really neat Spanish language documentary on there, The Pope Answers, where they've taken a bunch of Spanish speaking youth from around the world and young adults and brought them together with the Pope, and they had a freewheeling hour-long conversation.
Yeah.
And that was I really liked that.
Is it subtitled? Well, obviously I can switch on subtitles.
Yeah, I don't understand Spanish, so I had to read it.
Yeah. No, it sounds interesting. Because one of the things that puzzles me about you, Joey, is that you're obviously very intelligently informed about science, which a lot of people would say is very much evidential.
Yeah,
but also
you have to remember that the Catholic Church owns a scientific observatory.
So we
have the Vatican Observatory, and
sure. But whilst that's the case, they also Giordano. Tell me the name of the guy.
But that was
Giordano,
500 years
Kepler?
ago.
Is it Kepler? Giordano Kepler? Is that him?
No.
Who?
Kepler was the one who came up with the elliptical orbits. He was a Catholic monk.
All right.
And Copernicus was a monk.
This will be the next one in the sequence of discovery of how the universe works. Bruno, thank you, Rob. Yeah, Giordano Bruno. Yeah,
Bruno, yeah.
He was rather badly treated by the Pope
but at that point there were 3 different people claiming to be Pope.
Yes.
And he had some weird ideas he had some stuff about science which happened to be right, but he also had weird ideas about other things, about government and organization and stuff like that.
Yes.
And so the synod where he was condemned and stuff, and then it was the secular government that actually killed him.
Oh, interesting.
But the secular government said, well, the church condemned you, so therefore we'll kill you.
All right. So they took on the executioner role, not the judgment.
I think they deferred to it, but he was also problematic. From hey, we don't want a revolution here. You're fomenting revolution.
So it seems to me there's a mixture between culture and society and evidential stuff, which is, in the category that we might call science.
Yep.
So how do you cope with that? Because, I mean, are you, what is it, non-overlapping magisteria? Whose idea was that?
I forget who is that. I wouldn't put it that way, but you can. I generally go in the idea that truth cannot contradict truth.
Right.
Oh, I see someone talking about transubstantiation, so we'll have to talk about that later too.
Yeah. This could go on. I'm afraid I do restrict this to 1 hour, so we'll have to try and pack these things in.
But yeah, no, it's very much having an understanding of what is the nature of things and what is it. So like, even if you read back to St. Augustine, he wrote a little book called On the Literal Interpretation of Genesis.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't mean what we mean by literal. What that would be more to put it in our language, it would be better to say on the literary interpretation of Genesis.
All right. Yeah.
So interpreting Genesis as you would literature.
Yes. Yes.
And he says basically there are certain things you get to know from observation, that you can understand the eclipses, the patterns of the sun, the way things go, the movement of the planets. And if there's Christians who are saying nonsense about these things, that's very bad. So just paraphrasing from that.
Yes. So he was looking at the quality of the writing rather than the accuracy of the claims.
Yeah. My favorite scientist, Brother Guy Consolmango, who is the director of the Vatican Observatory now, he writes that science books go out of date.
Yeah.
So if you have a science book that's 10 years old, it's out of date. Whereas,
in some respects, but not everything. Not everything is at the frontier of discovery right now. Some of the things, a lot of the stuff we can bank as unlikely to be challenged in the near future.
Oh yeah, exactly, and also things that are close enough. Every time we teach Newtonian mechanics in school, we're teaching things that are wrong. We know that they're wrong.
But they're right enough. They're right enough here on the surface of the Earth. Yes.
Yeah, exactly, and they're right enough for 99.999% of the things you'd ever use.
Yeah. But interestingly, they were right enough for the early satellite journeys to the outer planets as well. It's just that they're not right enough for precise navigation using satellite sat navs to within 10 meters of accuracy.
Yeah, exactly.
So, there you go.
Yeah, but poetry doesn't go out of date.
Well, I don't know about that. Have you tried? The language goes out of date. I mean, trying to understand some of Shakespeare now requires almost a foreign language translation or interpretation ability. And if you go back to pre-Shakespeare,
like Chaucer's basically
Chaucer is incomprehensible.
Incomprehensible for modern English. But there's a thing where science, generally, like philosophers today, still study the ideas of Plato. Study the ideas of Aristotle.
Sure.
And accept them as Archimedes still got the understanding of buoyancy right too. Yeah, but so I would look at scripture, especially the early chapters of Genesis, as stories and myths, but myths not in the term as it's all made up. Myths in the term how J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis would view myths as important foundational stories.
Right. Well,
for a culture, for language, for
So I'm going to put my retired science teacher hat on here.
Okay.
Because I find it disappointing that stories count for so much importance in the evaluation of relative sources of information.
Yeah.
It disappoints me.
And that comes from our psychology, though, right? We're social creatures. We're creatures that thrive
Sure,
on
sure.
stories.
Yeah, granted. I don't deny that stories are gripping and that they are fascinating and that we love them, even the old ones going back, hundreds of years, Red Riding Hood, all that stuff. But I don't think we should regard it as a reliable source of information.
No, exactly. Not, and that is why I go up significantly against people who are young Earth creationists online. That's one of the things I have fun with on Facebook is debating young Earth creationists, because they become ridiculous.
Yes.
It just,
so where and how do you draw the line between reliable sources of information and ridiculous?
So reliable source, and so there's some historical facts of it. Like, I accept that the Gospels are fairly well attested. We have more evidence of the Gospels than any other ancient literature that we have. There's more evidence of the Gospels than Plato and Aristotle and stuff like that in fragments and in papyrus and stuff like that. But a lot of them, even the Gospels, have to be read within the historical context of which they were written, because they were written as literature at that time. They had different purposes, they had different focuses, and to understand the Gospels, to understand the Bible, is to understand how that fits in time, in space. The scandal of peculiarity, as some people call it. So,
well, I would contest that that we don't have reliable, accurate sources of information that led us to the Gospels. I think that the Gospels were cherry-picked by one of the two councils of Nicaea under the direction of the Emperor Constantine.
I was long before that, but yeah, that was, it was well before that. But
well, what about the Gnostic Gospels that got abandoned because they didn't fit the message well enough? I think this was done.
Some of those are just weird. Have you read?
Yeah, some of them are, but are they any more weird than a talking snake?
Yeah, but the talking snake goes back to Genesis, right? So in order to compare it with that literature, you're going to have to look at compared to the equivalent Babylonian and Egyptian literature of the time. And thanks to their writing on papyrus and or writing on the clay tablets from the Babylonians, we have some of the literature of their time, and we know some of their creation stories. And the epic of
similar. They're very similar, aren't they?
Very similar, but they're different in some very particular ways.
Well,
so
again,
in the Babylonian creation story, it's created by accident. Creation is an accident, whereas in the scriptural account, it's purposeful. In the Babylonian account, it's various views of mythology and various gods doing things. The Christian.
But do you not think that what has happened here is the various authors of these various scriptures, and of course, scripture just means writing, doesn't
Yeah.
mean anything very special. I know the word has been blown up to be self-important somehow, but it isn't. It's just writing. But don't you think that the fact that several of these different scriptures, going back to Mesopotamia
Yeah.
and even in India, the Hindu Vedas and Gitas, they've got some remarkably similar tropes, like
Yeah.
reincarnation or resurrection, different forms of
Yeah.
coming back, afterlife, and also virgin birth. That's another popular. What we've got here is gripping chapters that preachers, that itinerant storytellers found worked to an audience that threw them money.
Perhaps. C.S. Lewis has a different view of that, but
well, he was very good at his own fairy tales, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know if I was going to quote an author as a, I don't do authority worship, but if I was going to quote an author to back up my belief system, it wouldn't be a fairy tale writer. I mean, why not Hans Christian Andersen?
Well, C.S. Lewis had a day job as well as a professor of medieval literature.
But Hans Christian Andersen, unlike the Grimm's brothers, he had some quite moralistic tales as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No. There's different things in that, but there's a lot of different things together that come up. In the whole thing, but there's a lot of different views of things, and some of it is just lost to history. Some of it, because history tends to view things in the eyes of the winners.
Yeah,
it tends to view things that it tends to preserve things that were widely copied around.
Yeah.
It tends to lose things of average people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions we have about various Roman generals and stuff. They pop up here and they pop up 50 years later, and we have no idea what happened to them between those times.
That's right. It's a bit like Jesus not having an existence from the nativity until he was 30.
Yeah, but besides that one account when he was 12.
Okay.
Exactly. And there's a whole bunch of pious or impious speculations about that, and we just don't know.
Indeed. So, on the basis that we don't know, surely the rational attitude is skepticism.
Yeah, you could say that, but you could also put down as an axiom that it's faith.
Yep.
And maybe there is something there, and if it works out.
Okay.
I have found that faith has worked in my life.
Sure.
Yeah. There's good evidence.
What is faith?
Trust in God, as how I'd put it.
Right. So is this the Christian God exclusively, or can it be?
I would generally say that you can.
And if so, why? I mean, my favorite God is Unkalunkalu, who is the creator deity of the South African tribe, what are they called? The Ashanti, not the Ashanti, no, one of the Zulus, the Zulus.
Okay.
So why not theirs?
Yeah, and that's a legitimate point. But you could also say, look, and that's just not my experience, and maybe it is. I would also say that and I'm more of a generalist in this than many, that my view is there is only one God. And everyone who is worshiping God is worshiping how they see God.
Yeah, yeah.
And
it's a personal opinion. That's all.
It becomes partially, and there's stuff that's better attested and less attested. I think the Catholic.
Can I tell you why I think there's only one? Why I think the idea of monotheism, which of course it conflicts with the Holy Trinity, but let's stick with the idea of monotheism. Yeah, we could talk about that too, but before we go down that
I'll have to come back and talk about that.
Yeah. Can I just tell you my explanation for why monotheism caught on?
Okay.
Because previously, of course, there was polytheism.
Yeah, pantheism and polytheism. Yeah.
Exactly. If you're regarding history as a useful source of information, which it is in part, but it's very much a source that is vulnerable to interpretation and therefore personal opinion, unlike scientific evidence, which is pretty cut and dried by comparison. Sorry?
Usually.
Yeah.
Replication. It's like.
Yeah. That's why I say
a huge problem with replication.
Psychology is not a hard. Should we say it's not a hard science?
Yeah, exactly.
But where I was going with this is that first of all, in history there were multiple gods. You had a god for the harvest. You had a god for illnesses. You had a god for I don't know what. But the trouble with that from a business point of view is you're not needed 24/7, 365, are you? So anybody who aligned themselves as God's agent here on earth only got to work when he was needed, when the harvest was due and they wanted rain or whatever. That's when that God got prayed for. That's when they had business. But if you come up with an all-purpose God, one who can do anything, omni-powerful, you've got it's a good business.
It is, but how it came out was generally the Israelite, I guess, with the because that really developed more during the United Kingdom of the Davidic, under David and Solomon, and that's when Israel was at the height of its power in the Old Testament. And that's likely where a lot of the books of Genesis were, and the Pentateuch was compiled and written down from previous oral stories.
Until the libraries of Alexandria were set fire.
Well, I don't know if we'll find clay tablets from that eventually, but we'll see. But I don't know. But because it doesn't really make sense with how it spread from the Jewish culture.
Oh, it does. It does make sense. It's a ripping yarn. I mean, look how popular Spider-Man is. It's the same sort of thing. We love a good tale.
Yeah,
that's why it's spread. That's why it's hung around so long. It's a ripping yarn.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different ways to look at things, and I like diversity. I like discussing with people that have different views on things. You always learn something, right? If everyone had your same view, you'd never learn.
Absolutely, and I fully respect you for that, Joey. And I'm glad that we've been able to have a nice conversation without getting, up each other's noses.
There's lots of different things, and I'm too bad I didn't get to go back to the transubstantiation part of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm, you know, as somebody who doesn't believe in the supernatural, transubstantiation is a non-starter for me.
Well, and that because partially it relies on an Aristotelian metaphysics,
Yeah, yeah,
where substance is what the substance is what you identify
yeah,
with your intellect,
yeah, yeah,
whereas the accidents, what you see, are what you measure with science.
yeah. And that's where I think philosophy took a wrong turning, and was only corrected in the Renaissance.
Yeah. So if you think there's nothing
But
more than the material, then you'll have trouble understanding transubstantiation. If you think
yeah,
there is something deeper than the material, then
yeah,
transubstantiation makes sense.
yeah. Well, you see, the hurdle that I have to overcome is that believing that there is something other than the material is another claim. I mean, first of all, you've got the claim of the creator deity.
Yeah.
And then because you can't justify that with evidence, you've got to go to, oh, what about this? You know, supposing there's a supernatural realm. And that is what we call an ad hoc fallacy.
But I think like if you look in history, I think the supernatural realm came before belief in deity.
Maybe. Yeah, yeah. Ghosts, sure.
A lot of cultures, like if you look at the native cultures in various places, they have various supernatural views of things.
They do, yeah.
And that seems to be common throughout all the world.
Sure, sure. Yeah, brains want to solve puzzles, and when they can't find genuine solutions, they're happy to construct fanciful ones just so they can sleep at night.
And it might be that, or there might be something different.
Yes, indeed. On that note, Joey, I feel like I'm a real pal of yours. I think you're doing a grand job. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
One day maybe we'll come back and do a bit more depth in some of your other areas.
Yeah,
because we haven't.
I'm a bit of a Renaissance person. I dabble in a little bit of everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Makes it hard to specialize in anything, but
yeah. Well, we haven't touched on the scientific side of your life much, so
no,
there's all that to be uncovered.
That type of stuff too. So
yeah. Joey, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Take the rest of the day off. Bye-bye.
Bye.